link. Oh, thank you, Jason. And we really welcome some feedback on whether people can find the resources they need, and we also are trying to cultivate new resources to be added, and through kind of a curation process. So more to come on that. We'll send out some announcements. We do also have a newsletter that we send out each quarter, and we do have this Slack channel where we are invite you to join. Not all members who are in our community group are sort of in the Slack, but hopefully if you don't know about it, the links are there so you can join at any time. All right, so let me advance the slide. Okay, so now without further ado, then I'm going to hand it off to Kate and help us get started with our discussion for today.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the group for inviting me to facilitate this discussion. Like Linda said, I don't come with answers. I come with more questions than answers, but that's the point, I think, of a brunch or coffee or lunch or wherever you are in the world, dinner perhaps, that we are here to share and to brainstorm as a group, because we're all experiencing this kind of bizarre phenomenon together. So as Linda said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Educause. And that means that this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I always describe my role as living at the intersection between happy clients and happy employees. And it's a balance every single day. So this definitely keeps me up at night as we watch the statistics around people changing jobs. I have done a lot of reading on this. I've done a lot of thinking on this. And I like to think about it as a talent shuffle rather than a resignation, because it's not like everyone is opting out. So Lou, we know you got out before it got ugly, but there are a lot of people who are just shuffling, right? They're just moving from place to place. So I like to consider what that means for our for employers, for workforces, for institutions, for teams. And that's really the heart of the discussion today, is to sort of talk about the impact and what we might do to help retain, to help hire within our organization. So first, I just wanted to ground the discussion in a few, what I'll call truths. You're welcome to argue them, but the first is that the Great Employee Shuffle has actually reached higher education. So we're seeing statistics on people leaving institutions specifically. So it's here. Second is that in general, it feels like humans are rethinking their relationship with work. So I liked this quote from Catherine Himes in Wired. It's a radical shift in an individual's relationship with their work. And there's a slide at the end of this that's some resources for further reading. Mitchell offered a few of them and I added a couple of them. One of them is just about describing the pandemic as a traumatic event that we're all trying to come to terms with and reintegrate ourselves into the new world around us. And I think that that's really apt to put your head in the space of why are people really, rethinking and shuffling and making changes. And then that third truth that maybe hits higher education more than some other industries, but it's that it used to be that people were attracted to the mission of education and the meaningful work made up for other things that might not have been offered in the workplace, whether it's the large salaries, whether it's other sorts of conditions that people had to decide that they were going to trade off because the mission was important enough. And I found this quote that said, "The compassion for the students is gone." And I don't think that that's in all cases true at all, but I do think that it's a growing sentiment that people are saying where I work has to be about just more than the mission, and it has to fulfill other areas of my life. So we're going to talk about what those other areas are, discuss sort of what keeps people where they are, or what incents them to stay, or what incents them to hire into an organization. Linda, you can go to the next one. So, I have one more slide there to just show the 4 questions that we're going to pose to people. Can you pull that back up easily or no? Yeah, there we go. No worries. So I'm going to use Slido today. If you're not familiar, it's an online polling app that is super easy to use. And so these are the 4 questions that I'm going to pose to the group for discussion. So what are the reasons people are leaving? So that's the why. Where are they going? So who are we actually losing people to, or where are we losing people to? And then we'll talk a bit of a brainstorm that hopefully will be the good meat of the conversation around what changes do we need to make to retain and hire? So Slido is next. And Linda, you can stop sharing. And then I will take over sharing. All right. So if you go to slido.com, it should prompt you for, oops, can you see the right screen? Can you see my slido.com screen?
No, we still see Linda's, I think.
It looks like it is your screen now.
It's mine now. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
We transitioned using a similar screen, so
Yeah.
a
All
little
right.
confusing there. All right, so if you go to slido.com and then type in this number 178694, that will get you into the poll. And it is the responses that show up on the poll are anonymous, but you'll get to see what everybody's saying at the same time. So kind of a nice collaboration tool. All right, do I have anybody joining? Let's see. I used to be able to see how many people were in. Let's see. Anybody successfully get in there yet?
Yep, I'm there.
I think
Okay.
I'm there.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to open up the first question and so you can sort of check it out, and responses will show up here. So the first question is, just thinking about people who have recently left your institution or people that you know have departed workplaces, what are the reasons they're citing? So this is the why. This is not where they're going, but this is the why are they leaving? Okay, so work hours and flexibility, salaries, and then flexibility again, salary, pay, career advancement, burnout, unhappiness with management, administrative abuse, rigidity in policy and practice, overwork, just need a change, not allowed to continue to work from home, so flexibility. I mean, when you do the reading, it feels like flexibility, and salary is always there, but flexibility is a huge component. Just needs a new perspective. New leaders don't treat them well, don't have the empathy that's needed. That's a great list. Anybody see anything in here that surprises you?
Nope.
I'm just thinking through, like, what of these are sort of traditionally referenced reasons for people changing jobs versus stuff that's kind of driven in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I like to sort of put salary to the side, because people have always, I mean, salary is a driver, right? It changes, it allows you to do different things with your life. So I like to sort of put that to the side and look at what are the things that are sort of nuanced from that. I also think it's an interesting thing to think about what of these are higher ed specific. So being asked to do tasks outside job description, like there was one that was lack of empathy from leadership. Like, is there anything in here that feels like higher ed has fostered a culture or environment different from other? So status quo, lack of change.
I can add a thought about something that's unique to higher education. Is I've always referred to it as an old growth forest, in that the game trails don't change very fast, right? Change comes slowly in higher education, and I think that a lot of us that are attracted to analytics, specifically for the interests of this group, we tend to be innovation focused and future forward. And so I think a lot of times I have seen colleagues leave higher education, colleagues from the space of analytics or student success analytics, learning analytics, leave higher education for a nearest neighbor industry because the frustration with the lack of future facing leadership and especially the lack of future facing culture, right? Like even if you have leaders who are fighting that good fight, a lot of times there can be faculty and or staff members that really put up strong resistance, and it's a worthy challenge to help people come along and do the change leadership that's required, but it can be really taxing also, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's a disconnect. I have a friend who recently left a role that she'd been in for 30 years, and she said ultimately her values and the institution's values didn't match anymore. And I think that disconnect is being felt by people, and that's a good citing of one where, you know, I want to be moving faster than this institution can move. All right, new opportunities. All right, I'm going to go to the next question. Thank you all for that. And we'll share all these answers out so that people can sort of get the summary. But next question is, so where are they going? People who are citing, you know, this isn't an environment for me anymore. There's workplace abuse. I'm being asked to do more. Where are they going? Are they going to other institutions? Are they going from higher ed into industry? Are they retiring? Are they changing careers altogether? We have a lot of private industry or corporations. EdTech Jamaica, there you go.
Come on.
There you go. EdTech, so EdTech being a big one, state schools, and leaving higher ed altogether to industry. Private tech, totally different industry. So construction management, yeah, taking those skills and picking them up and moving them to a different domain. Staying home, starting own business, consultancies. So other institutions that have something that their institution didn't, which was flexibility. I think that's going to be a thread to pull on. Local municipalities, private sector, retiring, taking that earlier retirement. We should have done this one as a word cloud maybe, so we could have seen some of these bubble up. Okay, anything in here surprise anybody?
I'm curious how many people are picking up their skills and moving to entirely different domains. That one seems high risk, high reward if it's pulled off correctly.
Yeah.
You know, and especially if you're in an environment where the stress level is starting to, you know, the imbalance is taken over and you need to make a move. Depending on where you are, you may have limited options. You're not in a big metro with a bunch of different places to kind of shop your skills around. Interesting idea.
One thing that I'll bring up, which surprised me, I'm not sure if it's in there specifically, but you know, you kind of imagine that people who take retirement might be kind of in the having gray hair and you know, grandkids and just want to kind of sit around. But there's now this whole new movement where people in their 30s are doing early retirement and kind of living on a smaller income base. And so just I think it's an interesting trend. I don't know how much people in the higher ed industry are seeing that.
Linda, hi, this is Jim. Just to build on that, I've seen people retire earlier than, as is said here, earlier than expected, but then they go off and get another job. So they have their pension and earn that pension income and yet supplement it with something else.
And have, yeah. A friend of mine just retired, but really I see him still working because he's like on boards and he does consulting on the side. So yeah, it's sort of like retirement is not really retirement when you're still relatively young.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I'm not sure if that's just a nomenclature shift, because I know a couple people who have quote unquote retired, as in left a job and went through the process of retirement and then just got another job. And to me, that's not retirement. That's, I mean, when you're 45, that you can leave a job, take some time to think over and then get a new job. And I don't think we would have called that retirement a few years ago. So it's just an interesting use of the term to describe how people are changing jobs.
And if I could, this is Lynn Burks, if I could add to that, I mean, is it really all negative, right? I mean, we're seeing every industry having high mobility rates, and higher ed has learners, right? We want to learn, we want to grow. We need stronger partnerships with employers. We need to see different contexts and have different experiences. And it's not all negative. I think it's positive, and some of these could be brought back into the university over time, where the universities will have different perspectives and potentially flourish from these various diverse experiences. I think higher ed there's too much of a bubble there, and we need to expand there. So I see this as positive as well.
I completely agree. And I think, and I mentioned before that there was an article in the references that's in the slide deck about the pandemic being seen as a traumatic event, and what can employers do to embrace people who are just trying to find their way. And one of the points that article made was, let people go, because they will go out and have these other experiences. And then if you've made a good workplace for them, they'll come back. And like you said, Lynn, they will bring new and different experiences and perspective. And that's incredibly valuable to an organization. Yeah. So we do talk about it as kind of a shuffle, but it's not necessarily that, people are going somewhere. So there will be a give and take, and we can use it to our advantage. I think this is a great segue into the next question. So thank you. So let's go ahead. Yep. Sorry, there's another thought.
I was going to add that, the pandemic brought out sort of a crisis of mental health. And I think that in the past, jobs and so forth were very social in nature and of course, taking care of the physical needs in some ways. But the discomfort about mental health conversations and overall, as a topic in many industries, including higher ed, I wonder how much of that mental health discomfort that's taking place is causing people to move, not just in higher ed, but in general, and then basically looking for fixing the environment where really some of the main improvements can be made by taking the mental health topic seriously.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, especially when we hear of people needing a change, but not even knowing why. There's nothing wrong with my current environment, but I just need to do something different. I think that hits it's not always the fault of where someone's leaving. It may just be that where they are mentally, they need a shift. So yeah, great point. So let's do some brainstorm on retention. So specifically, what is it that your workplaces are missing? So to counter my previous comment, let's think about it in terms of what are your current workplaces missing that people are leaving to find. So I think flexibility was one that came up a lot in the first brainstorm around why people are leaving. But how might we retain those employees who are in a place where they are okay to stay, but they need some changes to be made? These are great. So career advancement. Reimagine work in higher ed. Can somebody extrapolate on that? So how does that, is that where we work? Is that how we work? Is that all of the above? Somebody?
Yeah, I think this has a lot to do with the flexibility, career growth, and also just giving people the opportunity to reimagine some of these roles. We have individuals in roles at our institution that are tied to arcane duties. And until we really think about how to leverage and train and cross-train and reimagine those roles, I don't know that it's necessarily humane to wait for someone to retire so you can reimagine their role.
Yeah.
working together to come up with a new and different way of being here at this institution would really benefit the institution, because you lose all of the institutional memory and the knowledge when that individual does eventually leave.
Yeah. Great point.
I can add in terms of work flexibility.
Please.
I've been working from home now since June because I did leave higher education for ed tech industry, and I still contribute to higher education and will return to it, I'm sure, one day. In my role allows me to interface with universities all day long. But one thing I realized just it took 7 months that work from home actually means work from anywhere. And we were talking about early retirement, and I think that partly what I've realized is I have the flexibility. If I want to go, I mean, someone mentioned Jamaica earlier. If I want to go to Jamaica and work from Jamaica for 3 days, 4 days, that's not going to impact my productivity. In fact, probably the reverse. I would get more done and be more relaxed and more of a contributing member. And so I think higher education administrators often, they try to have a one rule, one policy to rule them all. And really they need to think about which jobs can we start to outsource, which jobs can we allow to work from home, which jobs can we really encourage people to have that flexibility, whether they're doing 5 8s or 4 10s or some other variable schedule. That some states and some
Sorry,
institutions,
sister, can you hear me okay?
oh yeah, some states and institutions really really take that seriously.
Go
And
ahead
other
and share your
states and
screen.
institutions, don't at all.
Do we have a somebody
Yeah.
crossing into the call? That's
I
odd.
got muted him.
Okay, thank you. Keep going, Mitchell.
Oh, I was done.
Oh, sorry. Kind of at the end of a thought. How about, I do see a lot of flexibility in here. So just asking a question back, I mean, do the levels of flexibility vary across organizations, just in terms of the people on this call? Are there folks here who would raise their hand and say, I have a ton of flexibility, our institution does that really well? Or in general, is that a challenge in higher ed?
A lot of it depends on the job, but at UCLA, I would say yes, the university has encouraged a lot of flexible schedules.
Okay. Newly, has encouraged that since the pandemic started, or has it always been a cultural?
Good question. Again, nature of the job is tantamount to flexibility. But no, for the past few years, given Los Angeles and the carpool, the freeway clogging, the university has really been a vital part of the community and trying to figure out how to help the larger city around it. So yeah, no, flex scheduling has been part of the campus for a long time, of course, exacerbated with COVID.
Yeah. So geography probably plays into that for sure.
I can say I've always been so impressed with UCLA's policies for their professionals. I was at a lunch once in Boston with some people from UCLA, and we all were getting our, at a conference, so we were all getting our receipts, and I need my itemized receipt for my reimbursement. And the UCLA people were all saying, "Oh no, we don't need receipts. It's less than $50." And everyone else at the table was flabbergasted, like, what?
Yeah,
Like,
but if you think about the return on investment there, it's
That's
probably
right.
costs a
They said
lot
that's-
more than $50 to process all those receipts.
That's exactly what they said. They
Yeah.
said that the amount of theft is so rare that it's cheaper just to trust people than it is to ask everyone to spend all this time doing these receipts. But so I'm not surprised to hear, I'm actually really pleased to hear that they're being flexible about work from home and stuff too, because they've been a leader in that kind of visionary thinking that's just really common sense, right?
Yeah. And a step beyond that, what are they saying to their employees with a policy like that? That we do trust you, and that if we trust you to do this, we're going to trust you to do other things, and that goes a long way to explaining the culture. Great. What else? Thoughts that people had, or anything that folks saw scroll up here in these answers that they'd like to drill into?
Kate, I'm wondering, for the group, the pandemic forced a lot of flexibility. Are folks seeing that flexibility rescinded as things start to move out of pandemic and into endemic, if we're getting to that point, I guess?
I know that hasn't happened to me specifically in my current role, but my former colleagues, yeah, and interestingly enough, they work in advising and found that there was higher student satisfaction because they were more available to students. Most students preferred not to meet at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, but rather 5 or 5:30 in the evening. And so it was a better student experience. And then the immediate, let's revert back to this traditional 8 to 4:30 mentality, which I think actually really hacked off a lot of the advising staff because it's counterproductive.
So not only was that flexibility good for the employees, it was good for the students they were serving.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really insightful. Are others seeing that there was flexibility given and now it's being taken away? I know we work with a couple of ed techs here locally in the Phoenix area who mandated employees be back in their seats, everyone be back in their seats, and they had a mass exodus of engineers. So are you feeling like those sorts of arrangements are being allowed to stay?
Kate, I think I put this in the chat, but our institution is so huge. And so I don't want to say like, yeah, our institution is doing this very well, this, embracing flexibility. It's our unit, distance education, and the OCIO. We have new leadership that are very much into work-life balance. And we have a lot of younger staff members that are, they're pushing this envelope. They have been even before the pandemic hit of, flexibility in schedule. So when the pandemic hit, it just kind of naturally pushed us over the edge of where we were going in the first place. HR was even planning on piloting different scenarios. So here we are. And now HR is working on how do we make this something that continues on after the pandemic, if there is a true post-pandemic, who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't see our unit, and I'm just speaking for our unit, going back. I think that there would probably be a mass exodus at this point.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of institutions also look at like, okay, and again, it depends on your role, right? But, maybe Mondays and Fridays are work from homes, right? For anybody who wants to take advantage of them, maybe they've established a couple of days where they need people there to collaborate for some reason or not. And it's almost kind of some of the organizations or institutions I'm hearing from, it's like 30, 30, 30. 30 want to go. It's, sometimes people like to work, on campus, on site. They go in. 30% take care of, they do the remote work, 100%, and then 30% like the hybrid. So I think choice is important.
Yeah.
Having conversations. We all also have different productivity levels. Some people are morning people, some people are afternoon people. And allowing those choices, I think, creates an incredible amount of freedom and empowerment that actually adds to productivity. It doesn't take away.
I think that's a great point too, that when we talk about flexibility, we're not talking about everybody should be allowed to work from home. I think that's not the same as flexibility. Flexibility is understanding the needs of the workforce and designing options so that people, your point, very well taken. Some people want to be in an office. I mean, Linda's chomping at the bit to get another visit out to our corporate office because she's a people person, as you all know. And then there are some people who are more productive, more effective, sitting at home, being able to focus in a quiet environment. So it isn't a one size fits all. And I think that the value for an institution is making sure that there is some minimum commitment to flexibility, whatever that looks like for the environment, rather than just saying, okay, we're gonna go to this specific work schedule. Well, let's hear what people need and what they want, and then design the flexibility around that.
And we were even getting to the point where we had to have people work at least partly from home or remotely, wherever it is that they chose to park themselves, because we were running out of building space. Like we redid our, did our office. So then it was all open office, and administrators were like, isn't this great? And those of us who had to work side by side in this open office said, no, this is not great. So, but then we kept hiring on people, and people were sitting on top of each other. So it kind of like was, it's not even, if they wanted to go back, they can't.
Yeah.
Space isn't there.
Yeah.
So.
Jason, you asked a great question. So is flexibility actually seen as an incentive? Is it seen as a benefit, or is it baseline now? Is it the expectation? What do people think about that?
I'm lucky.
I think it's, go ahead.
I'm pretty lucky. I've got a small team, so managing that flexibility isn't terribly hard, and I try to be as accommodating as I can be. But I can't imagine if I had dozens, or a team of 50 or more, or if people were all over the place, like the different training and professional development that would have to be brought in to teach people to manage in that way, I think. And maybe that's the reaction that has to happen, and maybe that is happening, but this is not the way that people have been trained to manage work expectations and productivity. There's a correction coming, I think.
Yeah. All right. Any of these others? So this is an interesting one. So retaining good employees means we have to have better managers, since a lot of people cite bad management as the reason that they've left. There's also meaningful work, more incentives, flexibility, inclusion, cultural inclusion. Anybody want to pull on any of these and give a thought?
I guess I'll just underscore the managers make a big difference. I think when just my son started his first job out of college, he had a great manager, and then a couple years in, his manager left, and I knew that was going to change how he felt about his job. And indeed, he started to really feel, like he wasn't feeling as connected with his work. In the kind of year, it took about a year and a half before he decided he was going to leave as well.
Somebody had mentioned, right here, this with young kids that need for flexibility.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have mentioned being able to step away for 30 minutes to pick the kids up from school, drop them off at practice. You no longer need to rely on in-laws, a neighbor, another parent. I think that's going to be such a critical piece moving forward, especially now because we've really normalized my hooligans come on camera for these Educause meetings all the time. So I think that's something that's become normalized in the profession, and I don't think people are willing to go back to having very, very clearly delineated hats. Like it's all one big sombrero.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I just came across a term that I hadn't heard before, but I really liked it. Instead of thinking about work-life balance, where we're sort of seeing it as two sides to the scale and we're also always trying to get to some equilibrium, is work-life blend. So how are we feeling like a whole human being with the blend rather than the balance, which can always feel like one is losing while one is winning. So I really like that kind of visual, but I agree to that. I mean, it is not unusual at Unicon for somebody to ping, I'm stepping away for 15 minutes, go grab the kids, and nobody thinks anything of it. I think that's really healthy. As a group of humans who have to work together, I think that's a really healthy way to think about it.
Okay, I wonder if in the US particularly, there is a very unique as compared to European countries, view, say, for family leave? When a child is born, can the father also leave? Well, in the U.S., if you have sick time, yeah, you can take FMLA, but otherwise it's unpaid. So this whole idea of being friendly to families in the U.S., it's an undeveloped concept, and we know that it works well in other countries, but healthcare in the U.S. also depends on you being determined to stay healthy, right? So I think we have a lot of things that might accumulate to people basically looking for change.
Yeah, that is a great point. And actually, I'm going to move us to the next question with that lead in, because there's a question of how are we going to attract new hires? And I don't know if you've all looked at a job posting recently, but I have noticed a lot more emphasis on those kinds of benefits. So what does family leave look like? What does adoption leave or paternity leave look like in addition to maternity? And how might that look different for different families, and how are those benefits supported? And I think that that's becoming a huge component of how people are evaluating where they're going to work, is what those kinds of benefits look like. So the question that I've posed here on the Slido, if you can join one more time, is just what might we do to attract new hires? So what are we going to need to do in expressing the culture through a job posting and or changing benefits and incentives that are going to actually be able to bring on the types of people that you would like to add to your organization? So flexible work, yep, I think that's a must-have. But again, maybe that becomes a yes, of course we have flexible work, and here's some other things. So I really like this first one that's showing here: build a good reputation as good employers by having your current employees tell stories. Yes, I think that there is something to be said about an institution building its brand, not just for its faculty and for its students, but also for its staff. And so what is the staff brand at your institution, and how does the institution talk about what it means to be a staff member? I think that's going to be critical. Have and highlight great managers. Professional development. Become mission driven. So don't apologize for being higher ed. And attract people. There was a comment in one of the questions earlier that was, we need to hire employees that share our mission values. I think that's true. It's true for any organization. So flexibility, but also inclusion and diversity, equity, those, making sure that those topics are talked about and are visible. Innovate and grow, to the comments earlier. We need to be sure, maybe there's a little bit of a reimagining of the higher ed pace. Growth opportunities, professional development, work from anywhere. So we have one here. I think we need more specified degree programs and training for the kinds of qualifications we're looking for. A few student success analytics grad programs have appeared, but not nearly enough to meet the demand. So in order to attract the types of employees that you'd like to have, they need sort of the irony or the circle of this one, coming from higher ed to higher ed. They need to be products of programs that meet your needs. So someone said earlier that there needs to be a better cross between higher ed and industry. There's also needs to be from higher ed to higher ed in terms of qualifications. That's interesting to unpack.
Can I ask a follow up on that? And maybe this takes us down kind of a different path, but in my role, I work as an analytics consultant, and there's such a learning curve, not only to our product, but to this entire mindset. And I think part of what we've talked about in different groups is that you train people. I mean, I guess I was one of those people who learned how to use the product, really embrace that analytic mindset, and then jumped. And so often, like we're training people on campus and they're leaving. How do you, I don't know. I guess I'm curious how people are approaching shortening that learning curve to actually make some sustainable change.
Yeah, so kind of related to that, I was thinking if we want to attract and we need to make sure that they have the skills that are kind of more aligned to what we think we need, like what about internships, right? Like providing kind of
Yeah.
easy on ramps where we could get to know people, they could get to know us, and then choose to continue, and then we know they're already a known quantity to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I was also going to just jump off on the idea of the specific kind of degree program and qualifications. That could be a useful maybe follow on virtual brunch, or even some other offshoot. We could encourage our group as the Student Success Analytics community group to think about what we might define as, like, what would be a job posting for a Student Success Analytics team member. And this would also fall in line with some of the framework, the early work that we're doing to try to make a consolidated definition of what is Student Success Analytics. We are trying to come up with, like, what are the different types and what is a success factor. And so we could also kind of riff on that and end up publishing something that's more like, and these are the kind of common skill sets.
Great idea.
And I don't know, with the other issue, you have aspiring leaders, right? Like universities have this level of leadership. Do we provide executive leadership training to get them to that next level? I know it exists in some of your corporations, but that's something, I mean, obviously higher ed, most of us have very sophisticated business schools. Do we leverage those programs and use them for our staff as sandboxes, right? To help our young aspiring leaders, because some of our best and our brightest, I mean, some of these are very sophisticated business units. Are we attracting the best and the brightest into higher ed?
Yeah.
No,
I think just to make a note on what a great idea to leverage the content and knowledge of other areas in your institution to help to grow staff. I think that is absolutely worth exploring.
I wonder if to some degree higher education is feels the effect of what I would describe as cheap labor practices. Mm-hmm. I actually worked for higher education, different institution where this was language used in staff meetings, and what they were describing were adjunct employees or non-tenure track faculty, but even student employment, right? We typically ask, what is the cheapest amount of money we can spend to get this thing done? Can a student do it? If a student can't do it, let's get a part-time person that we will promise, full-time position, but they'll never get it. And only then do we have, a practice of tenure employment, which is unthinkable, at a commercial level. So I think that we are, our own victims in that way, that we always look for this kind of a cheap labor, which is conceptually, it is really a strange thing. And the only time it ever worked was during wartime, when labor camps were being created.
Yeah. Good food for thought, for sure. I'm just going to stop the share for a minute to wrap us up. I see that we're losing some folks, so maybe culturally you have 5 minutes before we should all be switching to the next thing. Linda, should I hand it back over to you? I hope that folks got something out of the conversation. Like I said, we'll share the data here so that you can kind of look through it. And Linda's showing some further reading that I do recommend if you have some time to go poke through. And hopefully this can sort of inspire more conversations internally.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. This has been excellent. I think as we are wrapping up, I noticed that Wendy is raising her hand. Would you like to jump in and say a few words here?
Sure, very quickly. I just want to highlight that we didn't really spend very much time talking about institutionalization of EDI or inclusion during this conversation, and it feels like an oversight given the topic. A lot of the people facing burnout in higher ed are often people who have been facing a slew of indignities in the workplace that were only exacerbated by the events that happened last summer. And as we are all being asked to come back to work, it's become increasingly difficult for some historically marginalized folks to feel like they have a place to come back to where they can feel safe. So I would encourage you to devote more time to exploring how you can incorporate inclusion into these conversations and figure out how you can incorporate this in like recommendations you make for other folks, in addition to everything that was discussed, which is also very important.
We could talk on this conversation forever, right? We also didn't talk about the horrifying labor force participation rate of women that have just exited the labor force. They graduate higher ed in largest amounts. I think the gentleman from UIC talked about this. They take on most of university service. They also are, the labor force participation rate of women is alarming. And so again, we could spend all afternoon talking about that as well. And they tend to do, what a great comment about who does most of the service and the work at the universities, and the service work that doesn't get the attention, it's females. So that's a whole, and then I don't blame the host. I mean, like I said, we could talk about this till forever.
I'll just add that there is actually an Educause student success analytics and DEI quick talk event that's happening in the beginning of March. And I've actually been signed on as a co-moderator. So Wendy, if I'd love to maybe follow up with you and maybe learn a little bit more about your viewpoint so that I can help share and solicit others to talk about it on that session.
Yeah, and I think, Wendy, that's a great point. I saw your comment right before it looked like people were starting to jump off, and so thought we needed to respect people's time. But I think that the EDI conversation, the women, especially related to pandemic kind of exits, those are all excellent, maybe follow-up topics. We could just take those individually if people had interest to see and maybe do a data dive on some of that stuff. What are folks seeing and experiencing? So if there are others of those that people want to offer that you feel like we didn't scratch far enough on, that would be great to share with Linda, and then hopefully we could do some follow-up. So thank you for offering those comments.
Great, thanks, Kate. And let me just go. So this is really just to close out, and thank you again for joining. I feel like we had a great discussion. Thanks so much to Kate for helping to keep us going and facilitate all the wonderful conversation. We're here and we'll continue to try to organize good programming for you all. So we invite you to kind of connect with us out in the Connect forum and in Slack. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thanks again for joining.